The following podcast is brought to you by Stammond Group and Stammond Consulting. Visit us at www.stammond.com to find out more. Alright, good morning everybody. This is Stammond Group and Stammond Consulting. I'm here today with Mr. Pavan Chopra, an educator who has experience of more than 7 years in the business. And we're here today to talk to him about emotional intelligence, particularly dealing with younger adults. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off by just asking Pavan a couple of questions. And we'll get to know more about him throughout the interview. So Pavan, maybe we can start with, could you introduce yourself to the crowd?
Hi, thank you so much, Dheeraj, for inviting me here. It's really an honor, basically, to sit down and have this chat with you. And, I've been teaching for the last 7+ years. It isn't something that's very easy and straightforward, but I can tell you that the perks and the benefits, they definitely outweigh the difficulties that we educators face.
Thanks for introducing yourself. I'm gonna throw a curveball here to just kickstart things. Pavan, in this day and age, dual income necessity has kept both parents working, and there's a lot less time for kids now because teachers play a pivotal role. You spend a lot of time with the children. Sometimes I dare say even more than the parents. We've spoken about emotional intelligence before. What kind of courses in emotional intelligence can we teach in schools to better equip children for the future? How beneficial would it be to teach children EQ skills from an early age, coming from your perspective as an educator?
Thank you for the question. Actually, it's a very, very relevant question to us today. You see, one thing that's definitely changed in the last couple of decades or so is the fact that we don't have just one sole breadwinner anymore. What we do have now is an exorbitant lifestyle, to achieve. And for that, many families see both parents going out to work. And as such, the child is really left, with various other caretakers, domestic helpers, sometimes even the grandparents. And the unfortunate fact is that a child's upbringing is best done by the parents. And what we do see nowadays is, children basically spending more time with their grandparents, children spending a lot more time with the domestic helpers. And I think the problems that they face thereafter are things that, as parents, it's one thing to be to be responsible for your child's upbringing, but then it's another to just have this mentality, this mindset that, hey, I need to go out, I've got to earn money because I've got to feed the family, and thereby I have no choice, but to hand over the responsibility to, my parents or even my hired domestic helper. Unfortunately, neither one of them is actually going to raise your child the way you want your child to be raised. So what happens? The responsibility of raising your child is now on the shoulders of the teachers in school. This is one of the biggest unfortunate facts that we face today. Now, I'm not saying that we teachers dislike this additional responsibility or dislike this fact. What we feel is that the problem here isn't so much that we teachers have to inculcate these responsibilities to them. What we feel is that the foundation of all of this, all right, I should say it's a false start, so to speak. Because the child's only going to be spending 6 hours a day in school with the various teachers, right? However, for the rest of the other 12 hours, the other 10 hours, the child's actually spending with their family. Now, the question is, when I say family, do I mean the parents? Or is it the domestic helpers and maybe even the grandparents? I've seen way too many times, I'm trying to get hold of parents, to let them know that, this has happened with the child and this has happened with the child, but I cannot get through to the parents. Instead, I'm able to get through to the domestic helper. And, unfortunately, the domestic helper is hired help, she's there basically to look out for your child's well-being, period. You know, the domestic helper isn't going to be going out of the way to ensure that, that the child's upbringing is stellar, because at the end of the day, that's not her job. It's not her job. She's not being paid to raise your child. So, if I were to put this in a little bit more of a technical term, I should say this is a failure with respect to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a while. But the way I see it, challenges-wise, I think the root cause of it is basically the structures at home. The structures at home have changed over the couple of decades. We don't have just one parent looking after the child anymore. We have outside help looking after the child. And unfortunately, that's just not going to cut it.
That's a great response. I will go on to my next question, which is definitely related to that. I mean, you did highlight some challenges that you face as a teacher. How would you say, or what do you say is the biggest problems you face as a teacher related to the children when you teach them? And what do you think is the reason for this? Is it related to their excessive use of technology? Are they always glued to their phones? Maybe I can pass over the mic to you.
Thank you. This is another interesting question. I'm loving this already. Your question now is the challenges which we face as teachers, and why do you think we are facing these challenges? To put it in perspective, I think basically one challenge that I personally don't think we can ever find a solution to is the fact that whatever the teacher is teaching at home, all right, whatever the teacher is trying to inculcate in the child, unfortunately, because of the structures at home, a lot of this is undone once the child leaves the school and goes home. It's just unfortunate, because I'm not saying that parents or even domestic helpers are deliberately undermining the teacher's work, but it just so happens that this is how things are. This is how things have become structured. So to put things in perspective, why are we facing these challenges? I think these challenges are both extrinsic and intrinsic. There are many factors externally that are affecting this. You mentioned the use of handphones. Tell me something. 20 years ago, did any of us have handphones? No. When we went to school, the things we brought to school was a plastic ball or even a used plastic water bottle, so that after school we could stay back and play some soccer at the basketball court. We used to probably bring some marbles, and we used to play. There was a lot more interaction amongst us as friends. A group of 10 of us would gather together, grab I believe it was called a pong pong, right? Pong pong. We used to grab pong pongs, and we used to play soccer at the basketball court. We used to scream at each other, we used to shout at each other, but we used to hug each other whenever we scored a goal. It was these little moments of interaction that I feel has built that foundation of emotional, the social emotional skills that's needed for the child. But when I see kids today, what I see is them slouched over, hunched over, staring into, no, not a book, into a phone, or worse, a tablet. And what are they doing? They're actually watching some videos on YouTube. Now, the unfortunate fact is, parents assume it's YouTube, it's regulated, and so on and so forth. Unfortunately, there's a lot of inappropriate content on YouTube. If the child has access to internet, I can assure you the child has access to inappropriate content. Now, that is just a smaller problem, that's being overshadowed by a much bigger one, and that is the child's interaction is with an inanimate object. The child is not learning how to interact with actual people. I think this is a big problem because when we were in school, we'd make mistakes. We had the courage to own up. We had the courage to reflect that, hey, you know what, we made this mistake, and I think we shouldn't be making such a mistake in future. So it's a good learning curve for us. But kids today, unfortunately, some of them don't even know that they've made a mistake. And I don't blame them. Because as kids, what basically we do is we explore. We're exploring our surroundings, we're exploring ourselves. We're trying to get to know our environment a little bit better. And that's why we're making these mistakes. And then we're told there are the do's of society, the don'ts of society. And back then, we did not need to be taught social emotional skills. In terms of self-management, I think we had it in place. We knew we had to do our homeworks, we'd do it. We knew that there was a time where we could watch television, cartoons on television. We used to do that. There was a time that we had to sit down for tuitions. We used to do that. And, self-awareness. We talk about being aware of who we are. There was no need for someone else to tell us that, hey, you need to be aware of your strengths, your weaknesses, your likes, your dislikes. Today, if you ask a kid, what do you like? The first thing goes, I like to, Unfortunately, the child can't answer. Because the child doesn't know what he or she likes. The child is only used to things. I'm used to watching all my cartoons on the tablet. Right? My parents have never brought me to a cinema. So the child's never been exposed to the cinema. I'm used to playing games on my phone. So the child's not exposed to playing board games, Monopoly, backgammon, or even playing indoor sports like perhaps pool or snooker. And unfortunately, the child's exposure is now just limited to that screen. So that is a very big problem. But then the question is, who's to blame? Who's to blame? If the child grows up without the ability to make responsible decisions, become a citizen that the society can be proud of, who's responsible? Can we safely say that parents are responsible for this? But hey, aren't they the ones out there earning the money? Okay, so then who's responsible? The domestic helpers? Hey, but aren't they the ones being paid to look out for the child's well-being and not raise the child? So then perhaps maybe the teacher is at fault. Hey, but honestly, we're doing our best. Whatever we do in our 6 hours, unfortunately, when the child gets back home, a lot of it is undone. So what really is the problem then? That's exactly why I'm going to come to the next point, which is the internal problem, the intrinsic problem, the lack of drive, the lack of motivation. Here is where Maslow's hierarchy actually plays a very, I think, to me, I look at Maslow's hierarchy very closely. The basic needs are met very, very easily. In fact, the basic needs now include a handphone. The basic needs now include, having an air-conditioned room for yourself. The basic needs now do include like one holiday per year. These were luxuries during our time. They're not a luxury anymore. So unfortunately, for the child, safety, security, personal well-being, all these things are a given. Therefore, there's no motivation for me to earn these things. I don't have to do exceptionally well in school to earn a new handphone or to earn a new game. I do not need to be exceptionally good at my piano lessons or do exceptionally well in my swimming classes to get the next game, so to speak. Because these are things that are readily available for them. These are things given to them, And of course, if we move up the ladder, we realize that unfortunately, back in our day, the kind of games that we were involved in, thanks to, the fact that technology wasn't that big a deal then, our games required us to interact with people. We were forced to do it. And we did it on our own accord. We weren't fantastic interactors from the very beginning, but it's something we learned, something we picked up, because ultimately, your personality best. But if your personality is kept hidden from the rest of the world, then unfortunately, you're not going to get into the habit of revealing your personality to everybody else. I just spoke about being self-aware and being able to manage yourself. Unfortunately, this is precisely where the social awareness aspect of you will fail. Because, I know me, but how am I going to present me to others? How am I going to present my thoughts, my views to others? Without actually running into a problem with them. And even if I do, how am I going to, turn it around? How am I going to, solve it? And unfortunately, kids today, they're just not equipped with any of these. So to put things in perspective, I think this problem is actually twofold. It isn't just, the external factors. It's a lot of the internal factors that are related to the structures that are in place at home. So emotional intelligence in my view, has been superseded by the IQ aspect of it, because you see a lot more people today with big degrees, but they're very lonely people. You see people with supposedly high flying jobs. They're supposed to be the head of their neurosurgery department in some place, but these are poor. I call them poor things because they don't have much of a family life. You know, they don't go out, they don't get to socialize, and really, if life is going to come down to that, then I think it's all pointless.
Well, thank you so much for that sharing. You touched on so many points that I think are so valid. You spoke about self-management, which is becoming more difficult because of the internal structures of the home. You talked about self-motivation, which I believe was actually brought up by Daniel Goleman, who actually did a lot of groundbreaking research in his book. You also spoke about social and emotional dysfunctionalities that are rising up in the child because of all that's happening. Um, you know, all this research, this personal experience that you've shared, all points to one thing, and that will be my last question: what can be done? I mean, like, our company Stammond Consulting is working on a program, that we can actually teach children as well to handle their emotions, to handle conflict management, to understand how EQ is so important in the world, because ultimately people with higher EQ do become more successful. It is not just about IQ at the end of the day. It's not about how much you know academically or how much book knowledge you have. Granted, there is success that comes with that. There is, but I feel that overall, people with EQ enjoy better lives. Like you mentioned, people with IQ are still lonely. Higher IQ are still lonely. So the last question I'd like to pose to you, very simply, is more about what can be done.
This is the big question. This is the one that I've been waiting for, actually. Um, okay, let's begin with a little bit of a short sharing session here, yeah? Bill Gates, college dropout, am I right? Mark Zuckerberg, college dropout, am I right? Richard Branson, I think, didn't even make it to college. And all of these guys are successful multi-billionaires. I mean, the list is long. I could just keep naming such people. And these are people whom, well, society, I'm certain, back then completely wrote off as people who would probably be of no use to society. Well, guess what? A decade later, and these are people who are actually contributing a lot more to society than many people with high achieving degrees. So the question now is your academic achievement all that you need to be successful in life? So I put it to you this way: you have absolutely no social skills. You have absolutely no social emotional skills. All right? You have no adversity quotient skills. All you have is a high IQ, fantastic double degree. Are you certain that in today's day and age you're actually going to be successful? Maybe 20, 25 years ago, you could say, yeah, perhaps the demands were there. But in today's day and age, unfortunately, nope. I completely, wholeheartedly disagree with this. A college degree, a university degree, a diploma, any academic qualifications will only take you so far. Your question was about success. I can certainly tell you today, success comes from that drive, that motivation, from that grit, that determination, that resilience, the ability to fail multiple times and get up every single time stronger. That's what's going to lead you to success. If you think I've achieved the degree and therefore I'm just going to get success, it should just be waiting for me on a silver platter on my table at home, you've got it all wrong. Whatever you've seen in the movies is completely farcical. This is not how things work, unfortunately. Even today, the highest qualifying people go through rigorous interviews. And the first question they ask in an interview is, why do you think my company should hire you? And I can tell you many people fail. Because they can never justify a reason as to what's so great about me that your company would need. So I think at the end of the day, if a person isn't aware of himself well enough and he isn't able to interact with others and explain himself, share his opinion, share his beliefs, share his principles, willingly, openly, comfortably, eloquently, then he's doomed. That college degree, like I said, is only going to take you so far. It's like having a car without a key. You can show off to everybody, I've got a Lamborghini in my garage, but I don't have the key to it, unfortunately, so I can't drive it. It's unfortunate, but that's the fact. To put things in perspective, on our end in schools, we actually do try to teach some aspects of social emotional skills. We have things like contribution to societies, going to the old folks' homes, actually arranging days where we do like a cleanup, school cleanup or even a hawker center cleanup. And these are just things that we're just trying to inculcate in them to realize that, hey, it's not just about I, me, myself. It's not just about me and my tablet. It's not just about me and my television. We've got to contribute back to society. We've got to interact with others in an effort to make change in society. And what I feel is that the unfortunate fact is, in 6 hours, there's really only so much we can teach. There's really only so much that we can impart to the kids. And kids being kids, they're going to take things, with a pinch of salt. You can't expect them to take things very seriously. However, if the exact same thing is done at home, with parents, parents have the exact same logic. If we go out and eat, we must return our trays, for example, yeah? If we have some garbage in our hands, we're only going to throw it in the rubbish bin when we find one. If not, we're just going to keep holding on to that rubbish. If parents can, model such behavior, it automatically makes things easier for teachers in school. It just makes things a tad easier, I should say, because that way the child knows that this is the norm. It's not a case of my parents have a different opinion and vision, and my teacher has something completely different. So I think all of these things combined is basically what I think is lacking. It's way too many gaps, within this entire story structure. So you have a narrative that's very loosely linked together. You have a nice introduction, that the child has been introduced to the world. But unfortunately, along the way, things aren't just turning out the way they should. So sad to say, the conclusion isn't going to be very pretty then. So this very big question of yours, do you think a program designed by your company would do wonders? Personally, I think it's a big yes. It's a big, big yes, because honestly, off the top of my head, I cannot think of any other known companies who are actually working on something so niche, something so specific, something that's really targeted, something that could help not just the young ones, but those that are actually going to be entering the workforce. And if this program comes out in the next couple of years, fantastic. I think you should just extend this out to in the field of education.
With regards to this interview, I really think you've given us so much enlightenment about what it's like when it comes to working with young ones, young adults. You brought up so many valid points, and you did talk about things like, problems that they face, right? Be it academic, they also face problems like bullying, the cyberbullying. They face so many issues that these kids nowadays, like, it's not uncommon now to hear about, children committing suicide, young adults actually going through so much difficult pain when they are with their families. And it really boils down to emotional management, I feel, that it's very important that it's taught to them at a young age, be it through a program, through the teachers, through whoever their caregivers are. And it's so important to have that level of emotional management definitely taught and imparted to them. So I really thank you for your time today. I really hope that I wish you all the best in your future in your future years as an educator. It's always been a pleasure interacting with you, and I'm really for sure I'm probably going to get a lot of questions about your experience from people watching or hearing this video. And if you'd like to get in touch with Pavan, please do contact Stammond Group and Stammond Consulting. It's been a pleasure having you today, Pavan, and thank you so much.